I'm new to this community. It's really fun to peer into a new group, and I feel very welcome. I don't know what we will say afterwards, but I better thank you now. Anyways, I just want to try to come back to the two concepts here, risk and uncertainty. So if you go back to the risk and the famous philosophical words of carve nature by its joints, very effective emotion creating ways to go into the deep detail of analyzing, for example, the complex notion of risk. And one way is to do that is to actually take, I have forgotten to write, risk equals probability times impact. So you have impact and you have probability. So you divide this monster by cutting its joints here. So if we look at one thing that people are unfortunately too often are doing, they are summing these guys up instead, the probability plus impact. So I've been at board meetings last year when they talked about that and had this kind of linear way of viewing this matrix that someone showed yesterday. The matrix, Linda, you show the matrix of the way how to do this in, maybe she's, or at least Linda's still here. No. So that was the thing they were doing, Karolinska, to increase the awareness. We're in Stockholm when the upper secondary high school kids are learning about risk. So instead, if we do the product thing, the usual thing here, we get these kind of very famous lines here. So that means that you're ISO, like an isobar. Here we got a specific risk. If you go to, for example, 0.5, which is about here. This is all the same. You can compare then apples with pears by following that line. So I think it's useful to do that, to divide that. And the same thing when we talk about uncertainty. We have heard that a lot of different ways to view that, but also to divide uncertainty into different by cutting that up is into different versions. What kind of uncertainties? Could it be uncertainty of the model itself, or is it the input value that is noise, or do we add noise during the computation process and when we transfer that into story? So thanks to Daniela, we heard quite a bit, some also yesterday about the pandemic situation, and so I tried to say that then that gave a bit of a general knowledge about modeling, or interest at least, and forecasting. But it also was a lot of misunderstandings, also hard to say what is the uncertainty here, what does that depend on, and we got into a situation where a lot of fights, you described it very well, Christopher, in the Swedish, there were like the 12 here and the 22 here, and they were fighting on the daily newspapers because their model was superior to the others, and of course very emotional because people were dying. I mean, that's so serious it was. And then the big change in England, and then should we follow that or not? So a lot of drama. And we also heard from I think, was it Helen, right? You suggested we should work more in between the pandemics to how can we better prepare. It's really hard to prepare for the next pandemic. I was very naive. We talked to other modelers and said, let's prepare models for the next one. And we had the same discussion in the previous one. So it really doesn't work. It's always a surprise. But what we can do is to organize ourselves. So we have now organized ourselves in MSB, Myndighet för samhällsskydd och beredskap, which I don't know how to translate. I'm happy I know that. Can you say it?
Civil Contingency Agency.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy that I know this in Swedish. But there's a project here to prepare ourselves for the next pandemics, and we call it Semaphore. It's modelers from all over Sweden, and we just had like a war game, and there was something we came up with. Malaria is spreading in Sweden now due to the climate change, and what should we do? And we got some data modeling, and we ended up by having a press conference. So I'm supposed to be the Minister of Social Minister, and And understanding that he played himself. And we all have other he used to be that. And we have other experts here from sociologists and so on, sort of presented this. And one of the people from Folkhälsomyndigheten, from the agency, she was very happy to be a very aggressive reporter. Payback time. So, but I think it's so important to train in communication, how to put that in together. And we discussed these different tiers. But usually in Sweden we have, maybe it's a little bit as you had in New Zealand, but at least not unusual to have a minister, but this guy was in center of the agency one. How to do that in a way that is as we say, balanced, but still informative. And I would say also another thing that we talked about, I think you, Jay, opened that up in the first talk, that we try to do what we can do. In your first slide there, you quoted, was it that we are working with what we have and do our best. And that's exactly what happened in the pandemic. So I met a lot of researchers that they didn't want to work this fast, because there is a scientific code. You have to send this in, you have to wait 6 months to get the referee report, and then maybe I can say something. And that doesn't work in this crisis. So to switch in between these modes are sometimes very hard. So we had a lot of good discussions about that. And here, going back to what Christopher alluded to, there were very aggressive attacks to other groups in the media. And I was part in one group that tried to say that we try to moderate. You have to be careful about complex models, especially agent-based models. We have to like putting some calmness into the situation. I don't know if it was successful. That's what we try to do at least. And hopefully this creating of this group would be also good for in the next time. And now I'm showing something here, but maybe I should just talk about first. That is how to present uncertainty. How can we do that? We have a suggestion about 2 different tiers. Or should we talked about numeracy at all, but how can we talk about the uncertainty here? Is that even possible? And what I got from another meeting with people in Brussels, they say, this is quite different from different countries. In France, you can easily talk about confidence intervals in the national press. That's okay. Like here. That wouldn't work in other European countries. In German, you need to have like a logical explanation, like implications, to be understandable or be seen as being serious. In the Eastern side, it's more of this is what you have to do, and not so much reasoning, but they need some steady statement like that. That is, of course, I mean, that's more or less gossip that I say now, but I think there is some truth that it's dependent on the culture, but also the different styles in the school. How many schools actually talk about confidence in people? So that's one thing that was lifted here by Ellen, no, not Ellen, Helen, no, Linda, sorry, who is no longer here. So that varies what we can say, but I think we shouldn't forget. I think we are trying to put it a bit more positive, that say that now people are talking about models. They're talking about R numbers, parameters even. So we have an opportunity that we should seize to also continue this education of the general public in a nice way as possible. So let me go to another example here. We have heard some talks about environmental pollutants and how can we talk about that when it comes to uncertainty, especially when we have nonlinear effect, like sometimes called the cocktail effect. What are the limits of this kind of poison in this water and that? Well, that's fine. So we have a long list of hundreds of these kind of different compounds. But what happens if you put them together? Sometimes you get some nonlinear situation that is called 1 + 1 = 3 or synergetic or cocktail effect. But how do we deal with that? So one problem with that is, of course, that if you want to do this scientifically, you need to do animal tests in all combinations. And if you do pairwise, that's huge. But if you have like 50 of them together, then it's astronomically, and it's not ethical. So we have to come up with other ways to do that. So in all other ways to talk about different limits, I'm not talking about uncertainty even, limits, you need to also take into consideration nonlinearity sometimes. And I think their answer to that is, maybe I'm biased, of course, but modeling, that we should work more with models and try to minimize the number of animal tests by doing some modeling and trying to find the pivotal things to find the parameters. So here's an example where you have two different agents, and the one is getting stuck and stuck up, so you get much more of a chemical problem. So there are these examples of miracle babies. Then you have birth control pills, but at the same time you drink some tea with Johannesört, with that some tea, herbal tea, and that suddenly you get pregnant. And also, of course, other more terrible things when you some allergic medicine and grapefruit juice, and that can create a very, very bad cocktail. So moving into one field here that now I have to have my names right. Yeah, Ellen, just recently now you talked about cancer. Right? Well, squeeze the mic here. Yeah, sorry. So you talk about breast cancer. And the combination therapy, as you proposed, were the best thing. So here's another student of mine. He's working on combination therapy. You see this kind of radiation, the red arrows here, and combined with the green medication at the same time. And that is the same thing here. It's even more higher dimensional because you can take it in different doses, different times. What about the timing, the dosage here? And the need of rats for this company to actually develop this is huge. So how can we do that in a much better way? And the probably is the same as using this modeling investigation. But I also want to point it out that, I mean, it's not only in one single individual, it varies a lot, the answer to one of these treatments. But if you have a cohort, then it's so messy. So then you have uncertainty on so many different levels. Okay, so you can get different schemes here, and the combinatorial explosion of actually testing is huge here. And I think you mentioned lymphedema, right? Yeah, and that is treated usually by compression therapy. And I just want to show that a field that is so far from precision medicine. I got surprised when I got into this, and I got a question from a surgeon if I can invent a new bandage to give you a right pressure. And this is the golden standard of today. So here is a nurse props that studied over 1,000 nurses. They were supposed to give 50 millimeters of mercury as the goal here. And this is what they had in this box plot diagram. So only 10% got in this interval. So it's outside the goal, actually. And these were the best nurses around there in the dermatology clinics all over Germany. But I think the most striking thing is like it's between 6 millimeters of mercury and 144. And if it's above 80 here, it's very dangerous because you turn off the arterial pressure and you can lose your leg. So this is the gold standard today in the era of precision medicine. So this has been looking like that for thousands of years, in fact. So I think that's a bit interesting. So I mean, this is we don't even talk about uncertainties are so overwhelming, so it's hard to say actually that we are treating that with a quantitative manner. So here is it sounds like I'm bragging, but here's the result of my bandage that eventually was better here. So this is now a third one or fourth one here is P-dome. So
13 minutes so far. You have 3 minutes.
Good. Yeah, perfect. P-dome. So maybe you heard about that. I was spent 3 months in Stanford recently, and this is something people talk about at these cocktail parties. What's your P-dome? You can hear that. And that is, what is your what do you think is the probability that the human race will be wiped out by AI? And that is something that was not spoken about at all 2 years ago. Or you think, or have you heard this? Or no. So I mean, it's so surprising. So actually, there is a homepage where these experts. Yeah, Elon Musk is not here. Oh, is he? Yeah, he's here. Oh, yeah, you're right. He's there. But Max Tegmark is not here. But this list here is starting with. You see that it's kind of important people in the AI community, and this is at the beginning here. LeCun there, for example, he is he doesn't believe in this at all. But there are other, head of the air safety, this substantial risk.
99.
99.9.
Yeah. I mean, so I just bought a book, his latest book now, so I'm trying to read that. It keeps me awake, I can say that. And it's it's so hard because that's one event thing. You don't have any frequency. It's really hard to see what's going on here. But what I think is also, yeah, I mean, maybe you can just stop here and go home. But even what I think is, what I talk about this here is because it's so extreme, because the impact is huge, right? That's the highest impact you can think about. Not only humans, but the whole biosphere might be, taken out by this. But if you say 10%, that's give you an enormous astronomical risk, since impact is so large. So how can you even think about these numbers? So I came up with just a last minute here that, there's a Pascal wager that you go to hell if you don't believe in God. So let's believe in God. So this kind of zero vision, I don't know if that's an international thing, it's only Sweden. We have a zero vision for death in traffics. And by pushing that to actually zero means that we cannot walk outside the door. Well, we have to have helmets all the time. And to avoid the same kind of argument here, we need to be more general about this. I think, did I say that here? Or I mean, there is one of these guys in OpenAI, he discussed Aronson, and it says there is a Faust parameter, which is 2%. So he can agree that there is a 2% chance we will get wiped out, because the benefit if we were not getting wiped out is so great, because we will solve the climate change problem, we solve cancer, everything. So that's a Faust parameter, because you sell your soul to the devil in that sense, right? So I thought we can use another parameter to kind of milden this thing a bit by introducing a Murphy parameter in this following way, that this Murphy risk is p raised to 1 minus 1 plus m in the denominator, and you pick a number, your Murphy number. If you're neutral, you pick 0, then you have the same old thing. If you're very Murphy law directed, if something can go wrong, it definitely will go wrong, then you have m equals 1. And if you're super optimistic, m equal minus 1. If there is a chance things will get well, then we go for that. So by doing that, you can see I'm increasing the Murphy number. Eventually I get to this flat case where we forget about the probability. If there is an impact here, that will happen. Right? This is what they will look like. And if you go the other way around, being more and more optimistic, you move this kind of risk towards here. That's fine with 40% risk here. So I've just suggested that, and as I talked to Jay yesterday, maybe somebody has done that in the 30s, probably in Finland sometimes. Okay. I can hear that later. Thanks a lot for that.